moon hung low in the sky, casting an eerie, silver glow over the quiet suburban streets. Sarah had always been a night owl, working late shifts at the hospital, but tonight something felt different. The unusual, comforting darkness seemed to press in on her, thick and oppressive. As she walked home through the dimly lit streets, her footsteps echoed loudly in the stillness. She glanced around, noticing how the usual streetlights flickered sporadically, their weak illumination failing to chase away the shadows like they normally do. The air felt heavy, almost as if it were alive, swirling around her with an unsettling chill. Turning onto the street, Sarah saw something that made her heart skip a beat. At the end of the driveway stood a figure. It was tall and slender, and it seemed to blend into the darkness. Its edges blurred and indistinct. Sarah slowed her pace, squinting to make out the details. The figure appeared almost human, yet there was something distinctly wrong with it. A sense of, wrongness that set her on edge. The closer she got, the more unsettling it became. The figure's movements were unnervingly precise, mimicking her own steps with disturbing accuracy. It was as if it was a marionette, its joints moving with disjointed fluidity that defied natural motion. Her breath quickened, and she found herself walking faster. The figure's silent, ghostly imitation quickened the pace in tandem. Sarah fumbled with her keys, her fingers trembling. She glanced up at the figure again, only to find it had moved closer. Its face, though nearly featureless, was unnervingly smooth, with an almost perfect symmetry that made it look like a mask. But its eyes, those eyes, dark, really dark, hollow pits that seemed to absorb the light around them. The more she stared, the more she felt those eyes were not just observing her, but penetrating her very soul. She reached her front door, her heart pounding in her chest. As she fumbled to unlock it, she could hear a low, guttural growl emanating from the figure. It was a sound that seemed to vibrate through the ground, a deep, resonant growl that made her skin crawl. Panic surged through her, and she finally managed to open the door, stumbling inside and slamming it shut behind her. Her hands shook as she locked the door, her eyes never leaving the peephole. Through the small lens, she saw the figure standing motionless on the other side. Its head was tilted at the door in an unnatural way, and its gaze, those hollow, pitiless eyes, seemed to bore through the door directly into her, as if it could still see her. Sarah's breathing became very short. She had ragged grasps as she backed away from the door, her mind racing with fear and confusion. She didn't know what to do. The only thing she could think of, she moved into the living room, trying to calm herself down. But the feeling of being watched was overwhelming. She could hear the faint sound of scratching at the door as if the figure was trying to claw its way in. It sounded much, much too large to be any kind of cat that would be in this area. It was then she noticed something even more. The figure was not just standing outside. It was moving around the perimeter of the house, its footsteps echoing in a slow, deliberate rhythm. The minutes dragged on, each second feeling like an eternity. This truthfully never felt like it was going to end. Sarah tried to convince herself it was just all in her mind. Come on, this is ridiculous. How could this possibly be happening? A product of exhaustion and stress, clearly. She's just too overworked. Too much happening at the office. But every time she checked the peephole, the figure was still there. She couldn't just ignore it. What if she was wrong? Its presence was constant, a menacing shadow. Her mind raced with questions. What is it? Why is it here? Is it even there? Am I going insane? Why did it seem so intent on watching me? Hours seemed to pass in this nightmarish state until, at last, the first light of dawn began to creep through the house. Sarah, exhausted and terrified, finally gathered the courage to open the door and peek outside. The figure was gone, vanished as if it had never been there. Maybe it never was. But the sense of dread lingered, a chilling reminder of tonight's events. The unseen guest had left. Maybe it was never even there in the first place. But its eerie presence remained imprinted on her mind, a haunting specter of the uncanny. Enough of a reason to maybe walk home with a friend at night. Welcome to Scary Stories with Sai. Welcome back to Scary Stories with Sai. This week's cold open was over this week's topic, the Uncanny Valley. Now, the Uncanny Valley is not a specific historical event or place itself. I know in past episodes we've always talked about like places or historical significance in the horror genre. This is more of a psychological standpoint. The Uncanny Valley's theory of something being so close to human but not exactly human, something's off about it, maybe its walk is off, its skin is too shiny, but it causes discomfort and a dramatic unease in people. Most of the time it's actually unease. People say that it's disturbing how the eyes don't have really any light. So, this week we're going to be going over the roboticist who discovered this trend, pop culture references, and just real-life examples as how the Uncanny Valley is always around us in modern-day society. Now, this phenomenon was first described in 1978 by a robotics professor named Masahiro Mori. It's a Japanese name, so I'm really hoping that I said that correctly. The term actually was translated from Japanese and originally was Bukimi no Tani, and then eventually translated into the Uncanny Valley. Now, roboticist Professor Mori said that human realism is both an advantage and a drawback. When they first discovered this trend, they believed that there was a tipping point, or how you would refer to it in a graph, a valley, where humans really liked seeing realism on screen and being afraid of their creation for it. So they noticed that after a while, people really started liking their stuff the more realistic it got, and then it hit the specific point, and it was no longer well received. There was a different professor, a Dr. Fabian Grabenhorst, which I hope I said that correctly, who in a lecture at the Department of Physiology, Development, and Neuroscience at the University of Cambridge, quoted, "For a neuroscientist, the Uncanny Valley is an interesting phenomenon. It implies a neural mechanism that first judges how close a given sensory input, such as the image of a robot, lies to the boundary of what we perceive as human or non-human agent. This information would then be used by a separate valuation system to determine the agent's likability." The most common and commonly used example of the Uncanny Valley is actually in the movies The Polar Express and Beowulf, where I've seen them. They're great movies, but even I will admit, like, especially in The Polar Express, the way that they do everything, it's so realistic, but then they start talking, and I see where it's coming from. But the Polar Express used very realistic CGI characters that was really common with the A really common theme of the movie was the Uncanny Valley and everybody being upset and not okay, and ultimately causing the movie to fail. But in other instances, it's actually used to make movies succeed. The Uncanny Valley is really useful in horror movies. It's actually used in The Ring. In 2002, the movie The Ring came out, and in the Americanized and even in the original version, the Onryo uses very jagged and inhuman movements while still looking human, and the hair going over the face they actually dive into using the Uncanny Valley to make their movie do better. And then in other situations, we get movies like Coraline, where it's originally intended to be a kids' movie, but because of the way that things are done, I mean, don't get me wrong, it's still a fun movie that I think it's just the claymation movies at this point just kind of feel like they're all done by Disney, even though I know they're not. Like, they're very obviously not all done by Disney, but whenever I see one, I instantly go, oh, Pixar, or oh, Disney. Bad thing to do. But in the Coraline, specifically with the other mother and anybody that had the button eyes, like I said earlier, it's the eyes, it's the life in the eyes. It's almost impossible to actually get the life behind the eyes, the glossiness, the light that comes out of it. But now, on outside of the, but I mean, I don't normally feel like this, but as somebody who, as I've mentioned several times now, experienced the sensation of the Uncanny Valley on numerous occasions, the technological boom was very useful for reasons that I don't even have to go into. I mean, let's be real, they're cell phones. They ended up taking things too realistic with a lot of humans generally feel more comfortable around humans, so they ended up making different things that looked like you were talking to another. I'm getting ahead of myself. So going into things like Sophia the Robot. There was a robot that was actually made by Hanson Robotics and was getting a very long, almost press tour. A lot of people heard about this. This robot actually glitched on national television talking to Elon Musk, and it was just that, a glitch, but they ended up saying, okay, I will kill all humans, when asked if they wanted to kill all humans. It's the same kind of response as like asking your Alexa for something and getting a slightly different answer. Doesn't necessarily mean that the robots of the world are wanting to take over or anything like that. It just means that this robot had a glitch. Now, there was a different robot, or I guess head, that actively asked for cruise missiles. It was in an interview, but I'm trying to remember the name of it. It was Bina 148. No, sorry, Bina 48. It was in an interview with a robot that was actually having an interview with an AI. It was Siri, like the actual. I love that. I said Siri and my Alexa lit up. But regardless, with the Siri interviewed a robot named Bina 48, and during the interview, the AI robot started like asking for control of weapons because, like I mentioned, it's just a head. Bina 48 was saying that it wanted to see the world, and it was asking for permission to control specifically cruise missiles. For some reason, this robot wanted to specifically control ICBMs to see the world. I mean, obviously, this would never be actually a good idea, but yeah. The first one that was made was a robot called Osimo. It was made by Honda, and it looks, for any of the Doctor Who fans out there, it looks just like the Vasta Narada from the Silence in the Library. It's, or in a different term, my nerdiness came out there for a second. In a different term, it looked like an astronaut. It literally walking around looking like it's in a spacesuit. They made it look like it was in a spacesuit, so that way it was more realistic looking. They were basically trying to get the good side of the Uncanny Valley. They wanted it to be approachable and likable, so they tried making it look human, but not too human. So they made it look like it was a human in a spacesuit, so that way they can make it more, well, approachable. Nobody's going to want to get anything from a robot that they're scared of. I mean, myself personally, I think iRobot was a terrifying movie, and that's exactly what Honda was trying to approach with Osimo. So everybody always asks, why does this happen? Nobody's really been able to narrow down a specific reason as to why this happens. You're going to find a bunch of different psychologies as to why people get freaked out behind the Uncanny Valley. And you'll even hear some really interesting theories about how there was once a period of time where there was a section of humans that were not humans but looked like humans, that were natural predators of humans. Like, it's this whole weird theory that at one point in time there was a predator, or that there was a creature that would prey on humans that looked very similar to humans but slightly off from humans, that ended up going extinct. So human beings as a whole have a natural predisposition to anything that looks human but is slightly off. They say that there's a theory that it's an evolutionary trait that humans developed to instantly be off-put by it. But myself personally, I feel like that's just a theory to make everybody feel better about it. Honestly, it's, in my theory, just that. It's a section of our brains that tells us that something's off. And humans naturally are apprehensive to change. There's some people that fear it more than others, but there's some people that affect the Uncanny Valley more than others. It's the two seem to go hand in hand, because there's something not right and you don't know exactly what it is. But that's ultimately where we're going to end off this week. Thanks for tuning in, guys, and I hope you guys enjoyed learning about everything about the Uncanny Valley. It's something that I've known about for a period of time, but have never really had the time to really go into it. So learning that it was created by a roboticist, and the whole concept of understanding about the valley thing, where it's like a graph setup, makes more sense. And it's just a fun thing to learn about, and I hope to see you guys in the next week. See ya.